You had been wandering around the wedding boutique for almost 2 hours. Now, feeling a bit frustrated that none of the dresses had captured your heart, your best friend Jungkook followed closely behind you, holding your purse in one hand and several shopping bags in the other, silently watching you as you moved from one gown to another. He hadn't complained once, but you could feel his eyes on you, tracking every move, every expression, as though he was trying to memorize the way you looked on this important day. Suddenly, your eyes landed on a gown hanging on the display rack, shimmering softly in the light. It was elegant and simple, yet breathtakingly beautiful. Your heart skipped a beat, and without a second thought, you turned excitedly to Jungkook. Yin, Jungkook, Jungkook, look, you squealed, grabbing his attention. He had been watching you the whole time but pretended to snap out of a daydream, as if he wasn't already entirely focused on you. His lips curved into a smile, but behind it was something else, something deeper. He shifted his gaze to where you were pointing, his eyes following the direction of your outstretched hand. The dress really was beautiful, but his heart twisted the moment he saw the excitement in your eyes, knowing it wasn't for him. The mask of happiness he wore slipped just a little as he struggled to hide the jealousy building inside. You grabbed his hand, pulling him closer, your fingers warm against his cold, tense ones. Yin, come on, you have to see it up close, you said, dragging him toward the display. Reaching the dress, you gently touched the fabric, and without thinking, you looked up at Jungkook, beaming. Yin, Hyunjin will love this. Let me try it on, you said, unaware of how deeply those words cut through him. He forced a smile, but inside, his heart clenched in bitter jealousy. He quickly rolled his eyes as if to brush off the sharp sting. You hurried over to ask the shop worker for a fresh piece to try on. Jungkook stayed back, watching you disappear with the worker to take a fresh piece. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Yin, wait for me, okay? I won't take long, you said with a bright smile. Jungkook, call me if you need any help. You smiled at him once more and hurried into the fitting room, leaving him alone in the shop. As you disappeared behind the curtain, Jungkook leaned back on the sofa, letting out a heavy sigh. He glanced around the room, his jaw tightening, frustration quietly bubbling up inside him. All this time, watching you excitedly prepare for your wedding to someone else, it was killing him. But he couldn't say anything. He was your best friend. After all, he was supposed to be happy for you. You and Hyunjin were college sweethearts. Everyone saw how perfect you two were together. But before Hyunjin, there was Jungkook, your childhood best friend. The two of you had been inseparable since kindergarten, through high school, and even into college. No one knew you like Jungkook did, but he had already fallen for you in the 12th grade. That was when he realized that his feelings for you were no longer just the bond of friendship, but something deeper, something that terrified him. Jungkook, with his cold and reserved nature, could never bring himself to confess. He kept it all hidden inside, watching you smile and laugh, never knowing what was going on in his heart. That hesitation cost him more than he could have ever imagined. In your second year of college, Hyunjin had proposed to you. That was the day everything changed for Jungkook. Watching you accept Hyunjin's proposal with so much joy, without a second thought, shattered him. It was the worst day of his life. He had cried for months after that, but he never let you see his pain. He stayed by your side as your best friend because your happiness meant more to him than his own feelings. Even as you dated Hyunjin for 2 years in college, Jungkook remained close to you, pretending he was fine. Then, when Hyunjin left for higher studies in Canada, you and he continued in a long-distance relationship for almost a year. Jungkook was there for you during the lonely times, cheering you up when you missed Hyunjin, but he never stopped loving you. He never could. Last month, Hyunjin came back for a week and proposed to you. You had said yes without hesitation. Now here you were, shopping for your wedding gown, and Jungkook was by your side, as always, hiding his heartache behind a smile. But deep down, Jungkook hadn't buried his feelings. He wasn't planning to, either. He loved you, and no matter what happened, no matter who you married, that wasn't going to change. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, you suddenly stepped out of the dressing room. His breath caught in his throat when he saw you. You looked more beautiful than ever in the gown. Your eyes sparkled with excitement as you twirled, showing off the dress. For a moment, Jungkook felt his chest tighten. You were perfect, but you weren't his. you never would be. His eyes flickered with a hint of discomfort, the painful reality sinking in once more. He had loved you for so long, but that love would never be returned in the way he wished. You smiled brightly at him, waiting for his reaction. "Jungkook, beautiful," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, but genuine. He couldn't say anything more than that because his throat hurts with emotions that were painful for him to bear. The place was adorned with an array of flowers, delicate white roses, and vibrant petals lining the pathway. The quiet whispers of the guests who had all gathered was completing the setup. It was time for the wedding to begin, yet something was off. You stood at the altar, nervously clutching the bouquet in your hands, but there was still no sign of Hyunjin. The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. You tried to call him, but he wasn't answering. Your father stood a few feet away, his expression tight with worry as he spoke to Hyunjin's father. They were murmuring in low voices, trying to keep the situation from escalating, but the tension was building. You could feel the eyes of the guests on you, murmurs spreading through the crowd. The weight of embarrassment and anger began to build inside of you. You had been standing there for over an hour, waiting for a groom who had yet to show up. Your eyes flicked over to Jungkook, who was standing a short distance away, concern etched across his face. Even from afar, he tried his best to console you, offering silent looks of support, but nothing could soothe the storm of emotions rising inside you. You glanced back at him again, feeling a small flicker of comfort in his presence, yet the growing humiliation was too much. Just then, you saw your father walk over to Jungkook, whispering something in his ear. They both disappeared into the crowd, leaving you standing alone, heart pounding with anxiety. What was going on? Before you could process it, Hyunjin's father approached you with a heavy expression, his face full of shame and guilt. He looked at you with an apologetic gaze, and when he finally spoke, his words sent your world crashing down. Hyunjin wasn't coming. He was nowhere to be found. Your body trembled. This couldn't be happening. No, this wasn't real. Not after everything. How could he leave you like this? Abandon you on your wedding day? Before you could even react, Jungkook appeared in front of you, climbing up onto the altar. His calm presence was a shock, but what came next was even more unexpected. The priest began to continue with the wedding ceremony. Despite the absence of Hyunjin, your father gave the priest a small nod, urging him to go on. "Yin, what is happening?" you whispered, staring at Jungkook in confusion. Your mind was reeling, your heart pounding in disbelief. Jungkook looked at you with a small, soft smile, though you could see the depth of emotion in his eyes. He reached out, gently taking your trembling hand in his. "Jungkook, everything will be okay," he said, his voice low and steady. "But for now, just trust me, take the vows with me." You froze, the weight of his words hitting you hard. Your mind was spinning, emotions crashing into one another. How could this be happening? You looked over at your father, who stood at the edge of the altar, hands clasped together in a silent plea for your understanding. The sight of him, the desperation in his eyes, made your chest tighten painfully. He didn't just want your understanding, needed it. You knew, deep down, that it wasn't just about you. Your father was trying to salvage the situation, to protect his reputation in front of the business associates and guests who were all watching. The weight of their judgment loomed over him. Tears welled up in your eyes, spilling over as you let out a broken sob. Without thinking, you jerked your hand away from Jungkook's grasp, the harsh movement driven by your pain. Your hands clutched your gown tightly, the fabric crumpling in your fists as you fought to breathe. The tears flowed freely down your face, but you didn't bother to wipe them away. It hurt too much. You can't run away to it, will spoil your father's reputation. Before you knew it, the ceremony was over. The priest's words rang in your ears. Husband and wife, the guests didn't seem to care what had just happened. They offered their polite applause and began to disperse as though it were any other wedding. But you couldn't hold it in any longer. As soon as the crowd began to thin, you turned on your father, your voice breaking with anguish. "Yin, what is wrong with all of you?" you cried out, tears streaming down your face. "Why did Hyunjin leave me like this? Why is nobody asking what I want?" Your voice was raw with pain, and Jungkook, standing beside you, could feel every crack in your words like a knife to his chest. He wanted to reach out to you, to pull you into his arms, but you wouldn't let him. You were too hurt, too angry. you couldn't even bear to look at him. Hyunjin's father stepped forward, his face ashen with guilt and shame. "Daughter, listen," he began, his voice heavy with regret. But before you could respond, the world around you began to blur. Black spots danced in front of your vision, and your knees buckled beneath you. The last thing you saw was Jungkook's panicked expression before you collapsed into his arms. "Jungkook, Yin, oh my god." Jungkook's voice was thick with worry, his hands trembling as he gently patted your cheeks, trying to wake you. "Yin, hey, open your eyes, please," your father said, but nothing happened. He scooped you up into his arms, his heart racing as he cradled your unconscious form against his chest. His eyes flashed with anger as he looked at the people around him. His voice dropped cold and commanding as he spoke through gritted teeth. "Jungkook, I'm taking her home, now." Jungkook gently placed you on the soft bed, carefully supporting your head as he laid you down. He sat beside you for a while, softly patting your head, his fingers gently brushing through your hair as he watched over you. You looked so fragile, so exhausted, and it pained him to see you like this. After a moment, he knelt down, slipping off your heels one by one. He then began to massage your feet, his touch firm but tender, hoping to bring you some comfort. Soon, the doctor arrived and examined you, providing a prescription before leaving quietly. Jungkook wasted no time and called a maid to come in and help change your dress. He made sure to step outside, giving you privacy as the maid tended to you. While he waited, his mind was racing. He pulled out his phone and dialed one of his most trusted bodyguards. His voice was sharp and firm as he gave his instructions. "Jungkook, I want Hyunjin's information. I don't care where he is or who he's with. Just get me everything." Jungkook hung up, his eyes hardening for a moment before he returned to the room. He found himself kneeling by the bed, resting his head and hands near your body, his eyes fixed on your peaceful face. A small smile crept onto his lips as he admired you. For some reason, despite the chaos of the day, he found comfort in this moment. You, the love of his life, were here, lying on his bed, so comfortably. Maybe it was selfish, but he couldn't help it. He loved you deeply. And now, fate had handed him this opportunity, one he had only dreamt of. He silently vowed that no matter what, even if Hyunjin came back, he would never let you go. He'd make you fall in love with him, no matter how long it took. Just then, you stirred, your body shifting as you slowly woke up. Jungkook quickly straightened up, sitting beside the bed, watching as you blinked and adjusted to the light. It took you a moment to realize where you were, but once you did, the realization hit hard. This was Jungkook's room. You sat up abruptly, eyes narrowing in anger as you glared at him. "Yin, why the hell am I here?" you snapped, your voice sharp and accusing. The harshness in your tone made Jungkook's heart ache. He tried to stay calm, not wanting to upset you further. "Jungkook, Yin, let's eat first, okay? I'll ask the maids to bring some food. You need to take your medicine." "Yin, go to hell," you screamed, throwing off the blankets and scrambling to get off the bed. You didn't want to be here, not in this room, not in this situation. Jungkook quickly stood up, running after you. He caught you just before you reached the door, wrapping his arms around you from behind. "Jungkook, Yin, listen, where are you going?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. You yanked his hands away with a harsh movement, your voice trembling with emotion. "Yin, none of your business." Jungkook frowned, confused by the sudden hostility. "Jungkook, why are you talking to me like that?" "Yin, because I don't need your sympathy," you yelled, your chest heaving as the tears began to well up again. "Yin, you must feel so sorry for me, don't you? You married me because you pity me, right? Because my fiancé left me standing there like a fool." Your face was red with anger and your eyes glistened with unshed tears. The emotions you had been holding back for so long burst out all at once. You felt humiliated, abandoned, and betrayed. Why had Hyunjin left you? What had you done wrong? Your voice cracked as you broke down, sobs shaking your entire body. "Yin, why? Why did he do this to me? What did I ever do to deserve this?" Jungkook's heart shattered as he watched you fall apart. He reached for you, pulling you into his arms, sitting down with you as you collapsed into his chest. "Jungkook, it's okay, Yin. I'm here," he whispered, his voice soft but firm as he held you tightly. But you didn't want his comfort. You wiggled in his arms, hitting his chest weakly, your sobs growing louder. "Yin, I don't want you. I want him. Find him. Jungkook, ask him why he did this to me." You beat your fists against his chest, but Jungkook didn't stop you. He knew you needed to let it all out. The pain, the confusion, the heartache. 3 years. You had been with Hyunjin for 3 years, and now, on the day of your wedding, he had disappeared without a word. It wasn't fair, and you weren't ready to accept that he had left you. Jungkook gently caught your hands, stopping you from hitting him any further. He held them tightly in his, pulling you closer into his embrace as he rested his chin on your head, his hand rubbing your back soothingly. Jungkook, shh, I'll find him, okay? I promise I'll find him for you, he murmured, softly. But for now, stop crying. Please, Yin, you're my good girl, right? His words, though gentle, made your sobs soften. Your head rested against his shoulder, and you nodded weakly, still sniffling as the tears continued to flow. Jungkook stroked your back, his heart breaking with every tear you shed. He hated seeing you like this. Jungkook, let me get you something to eat, he whispered, wiping away the fresh tears on your cheeks. You need to take your medicine. You nodded again, too exhausted to argue anymore. Jungkook lifted you gently in his arms, carrying you back to the bed and setting you down carefully. He leaned down and kissed your forehead softly, his lips lingering for a moment longer than usual. Jungkook, don't overthink, okay? Everything's going to be fine, he reassured you, brushing a strand of hair away from your face. I'll be right back with food. You watched him as he left the room, your heart heavy with sadness and confusion. Everything was falling apart, and yet, Jungkook was here holding you together in the only way he knew how. The next day, when you woke up, you found yourself alone in the big empty bed. The warmth of the blankets did nothing to chase away the cold feeling. In your heart, memories of Hyunjin flashed in your mind, and before you knew it, tears were already streaming down your cheeks. It was like a fresh wave of pain hitting you all over again. How could he leave you? Why had he done this? Your sobs filled the silence of the room, your chest heaving as you let the tears fall freely. But just as you were about to sink further into your grief, the door creaked open, and a soft voice pulled you from your sadness. Jungkook, hey, princess, you're awake. Jungkook's voice was warm and tender, but when he saw your tear-streaked face, his heart clenched. He stood there for a moment, his eyes filled with concern, but he didn't say anything about your tears. He knew that talking about Hyunjin right now wouldn't help. It would only cause you more pain. He understood that you needed time, even if it broke him to see you like this. He walked over to you with a tray of food in his hands and placed it on the nightstand beside you. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he gently helped you sit up, his hands careful as if he didn't want to hurt you more than you already were. He wiped the tears from your cheeks with the pads of his thumbs, then leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to your forehead, lingering there for a moment longer. Jungkook, my mom and dad are coming tomorrow from the US, he said quietly, his voice hopeful. I told them I married you. A shy smile tugged at his lips as he said those words, as if he was excited for you to meet them, hoping that maybe this could be the start of something new. But the moment was shattered when you spoke. Yin, I don't consider you my husband, Jungkook, you said coldly, your voice lacking the warmth he had hoped to hear. And why did you even tell your parents? We're going to divorce in a few days anyway. The smile on his face disappeared in an instant, his expression darkened, and the light in his eyes faded. He stared at you for a moment, the silence between you growing thick with tension. Jungkook, and who decided that? He asked, his voice low, but there was an edge to it. Yin, I did, you replied sharply, your voice filled with frustration and bitterness. Jungkook sighed deeply, clearly trying to keep himself calm. He clenched his fists for a moment before releasing them, his eyes softening despite the pain that your words had caused. Jungkook, it's okay, he said, his tone quieter now. Eat your breakfast, all right? You didn't want him to care for you like this. You didn't want to feel like a burden to anyone. Without even thinking, you pushed the tray away, your voice sharp as you snapped at him. Yin, take the tray and get out, you shouted, your anger bubbling to the surface as you threw yourself back under the blankets. Jungkook's heart ached at your words, the rejection hitting him harder than he expected. He wanted so badly to help you, to ease your pain, but he knew you weren't ready to accept him. Not yet. He stood up, his eyes lingering on you, one last time before speaking softly. Jungkook, eat it when you feel like it, he said, his voice filled with quiet sadness. I'm leaving the tray here." Your tears started again, soaking into the pillow as the weight of everything crashed down on you once more. A few months had passed since Jungkook's parents came and left, showering you both with blessings and well wishes. You had smiled politely, thanked them, and played the part of a dutiful daughter-in-law. However, something had changed between you and Jungkook. You were no longer cold toward him, no longer lashing out or pushing him away. Over time, you came to realize that he wasn't the one to blame. As he was your best friend since birth, it was easy to get comfortable with him, and moreover, it was Hyunjin who broke your heart, and you had been unfairly pouring your anger onto Jungkook, who had only ever been kind to you. Now, you found yourself waiting for him to come home, sitting quietly on the couch, as had become your routine. Every evening, he would come back, and the two of you would share a meal together. It had become a simple, yet intimate ritual, and his patience and gentle demeanor had started to melt the walls around your heart. As you sat there, the door opened, and Jungkook stepped inside with a bright smile on his face. His eyes immediately found yours, and he walked over to you, with a bouquet of flowers in his hands, his smile widening as he approached. "Jungkook, hey, baby," he greeted, his voice soft as he knelt down beside you, holding out the flowers. You took the bouquet from him, the soft fragrance filling your senses as you brought them close to your face. "Yin, why are you late?" you asked, your tone gentle but carrying a hint of demand. His eyes widened a bit in surprise at your question, his heart racing at the thought that you were worried about him. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips, and he scratched the back of his neck, looking a little guilty. "Jungkook, I was in a meeting that ran late. I'm sorry I made you wait." You nodded, your eyes softening as you gestured toward the table. "Yin, let's eat." You both settled at the dining table, a comfortable silence surrounding you. Jungkook sat close beside you, his presence warm and reassuring. As you both started eating, Jungkook couldn't help but sneak small glances at you, his heart swelling with affection each time he saw you take a bite. Slowly, he brought his spoon up to your lips, feeding you a bite of food with a soft smile on his face. Soon you both were half done, when you hesitated for a moment, poking his shoulder before softly whispering, "Yin, Jungkook." He immediately gave you his full attention, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Jungkook, what is it?" he asked, his voice gentle as he continued, feeding you another bite of food. Taking a deep breath, you fidgeted with the spoon in your hand. "Yin, did you find Hyunjin?" Jungkook froze, the question catching him off guard. His heart skipped a beat, his mind racing. He thought you had accepted what had happened, that you were starting to move on. He already knew where Hyunjin was. He had found him weeks ago but chose not to tell you, hoping that in time you wouldn't need to know. He had been planning to replace Hyunjin in your heart, believing that once you fully accepted him, he could then deal with Hyunjin in his own way, quietly, and without your involvement. But hearing you ask for him again, his chest tightened. He knew this wasn't over for you yet. "Jungkook, why are you asking?" Jungkook stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. He gently placed another spoonful of food in front of you, hoping to distract you. You took the bite and chewed slowly, your eyes downcast. "Yin, I need to know why he did this, why he left me like that," you whispered, your voice shaky. "Yin, I've accepted that I'm your wife now, and I'm trying to move on, but I can't live with this lingering feeling, this question that's always there. I need to confront him, to hear the reason from his own mouth." Jungkook felt a mix of emotions at your words. Hearing you call yourself his wife made his heart swell with pride and love, but the mention of Hyunjin brought a shadow over his happiness. He nodded, hiding the internal turmoil he felt, and smiled softly. "Jungkook, I understand," he said gently, "but let's finish dinner for now, okay? We'll talk about this later." Later that night, you both lay in bed, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Jungkook opened his arms for you, and without hesitation, you snuggled into his chest, finding comfort in his warmth. He gently wrapped his arms around you, holding you close. The rhythm of his heartbeat was soothing, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. You leaned up, pressing a brief kiss to his lips. Jungkook smiled, the shy, boyish smile that always melted your heart. You loved how he became so flustered whenever you kissed him or held his hand, like a teenage boy experiencing love for the first time. It was endearing, and it always made you smile. Jungkook pulled you closer, resting his chin on top of your head, and whispered, "Jungkook, everything's going to be okay, Yin. I'm here, and I'll always be here for you." You nodded against his chest, your eyes slowly closing as sleep began to take over. It was the middle of the night, and both you and Jungkook were sound asleep, wrapped in each other's arms. But the peaceful silence of the night was soon interrupted by the sharp ringing of your phone on the bedside table. Jungkook stirred awake, blinking sleepily as he glanced at the phone. You were still fast asleep, your face buried against his chest, so he gently untangled himself from your arms, not wanting to wake you. He reached for the phone, and when he saw the caller ID, his eyes widened in shock. Hyunjin. Jungkook's heart pounded in his chest, his jaw tightening as he carefully got out of bed and stepped into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind him. He didn't want to disturb your sleep, especially not over something, or rather someone who no longer had a place in your life. Taking a deep breath, he answered the call, his voice low and cold. "Jungkook, why the hell are you calling?" There was silence for a moment before Hyunjin's voice came through, shaky and desperate. "Hyunjin, Jungkook, where's Yin? Is she okay?" Jungkook's grip on the phone tightened as anger boiled in his veins. How dare Hyunjin call after everything he'd done? How dare he ask about you now? "Jungkook, none of your business." Jungkook spat, his voice sharp and filled with restrained fury. "Hyunjin, please, Jungkook, listen to me." Hyunjin's voice cracked on the other end. I made a huge mistake. I need to apologize to her. I can't live with this guilt anymore. Please, help me. Let me see Yin." Jungkook smirked bitterly, shaking his head at Hyunjin's nerve. "Jungkook, help you? You think you deserve any help from me?" There was a long pause before Hyunjin spoke again, his voice trembling. "Hyunjin, please, let's meet. I need to talk." He replied a quick alright before hanging up and deleting the history. The next morning, Jungkook sat across from Hyunjin at a small cafe. The air between them was tense. Jungkook stared at Hyunjin, his expression unreadable as he watched the man in front of him. Hyunjin, on the other hand, was a mess, tears streaming down his face as he rubbed his temples in frustration. Jungkook, surprisingly calm, raised an eyebrow, his gaze cold and calculating. He didn't hold any grudges against Hyunjin, oddly enough. If anything, he felt a twisted sense of gratitude. Because of Hyunjin's betrayal, he was able to marry you, to keep you for himself. "Hyunjin, I made a mistake, Jungkook." Hyunjin choked out, his voice hoarse. "Please, help me apologize to Yin. I know she must be upset with me, and I'm sure she's missing me, but I'm here now. I'm ready to fix things. Please help me make Yin understand." Jungkook leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a smirk as he watched Hyunjin crumble before him. Audacity of this man was unbelievable. "Jungkook, why didn't you show up on the wedding day?" Jungkook asked, his voice calm. Hyunjin's shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to the table as shame washed over him. "Hyunjin, I was celebrating my bachelor's night," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I got drunk with my friends at a club, and I ended up sleeping with a girl there. When I woke up the next morning, it was too late. I had so many missed calls from Yin, from my dad, and when I saw the girl lying next to me, I panicked." Hyunjin's voice cracked as he continued, his hands trembling. "Hyunjin, I couldn't bring myself to marry Yin after that. I felt so guilty. But Jungkook, I love her. I love her so much. It was a mistake, just one mistake. I know she'll understand." Jungkook's heart raced, his fists clenching under the table as Hyunjin's words echoed in his head. Without a word, Jungkook stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor as he stepped toward Hyunjin. Before Hyunjin could react, Jungkook's fist connected with his face in a brutal punch, sending him sprawling to the floor. Blood dripped from Hyunjin's nose as he groaned in pain, clutching his face. But Jungkook wasn't finished. "Jungkook, you bastard," Jungkook growled, grabbing Hyunjin by the collar and pulling him to his feet. "Don't you ever say her name again." He punched him again, harder this time, the force of it sending Hyunjin crashing into the table. Hyunjin's face was a bloody mess now, his body slumped against the edge of the table. But Jungkook wasn't done. His anger was like a tidal wave, crashing over him, and all he could think about was the pain you had suffered because of this man. "Jungkook, you don't deserve her," Jungkook shouted, his voice shaking with fury. He grabbed Hyunjin by the shirt again, lifting him up and landing another punch square on his jaw. Hyunjin groaned, blood dripping from his mouth as he weakly tried to shield himself. But Jungkook was relentless. He threw one final punch, sending Hyunjin crashing back down to the floor, his body limp and defeated. With one last glance at the broken man on the floor, Jungkook turned and walked out of the caf, his hands still trembling with adrenaline. He knew Hyunjin deserved every punch, every ounce of pain he had just inflicted, and deep down, Jungkook was ready to do anything to protect you from Hyunjin and from anyone else who dared to hurt you again. The next morning, Jungkook was in the bedroom, lazily scrolling through his phone after a good night's sleep. Meanwhile, you were in the kitchen, whipping up some pancakes for breakfast. You could hear his soft footsteps approaching before you felt his arms wrap around your waist from behind, his bare chest pressed warmly against your back, and you shivered slightly at the contact. He leaned down, resting his chin on your shoulder, and his deep voice rumbled close to your ear. "Jungkook, what are you making, darling?" You smiled softly, looking over your shoulder at him. "Yin, some pancakes." Jungkook hummed in approval, his breath tickling the side of your neck. He tightened his arms around you, and you could feel every inch of his warmth against you. Your heart began to race as you focused on flipping the pancake, but his presence was distracting, too distracting. "Yin, this feels different," you murmured, not even sure why you said it. You had been in his embrace countless times before, but this felt more intimate, more intense. Jungkook smirked, tilting his head closer. "Jungkook, what feels different?" "This," he teased, and before you could answer, he leaned in and playfully sked your yet robe. Your body jolted from the unexpected gesture, and you pushed back into him, without meaning to. But Jungkook held you steady, his strong arms not letting you go. You swallowed, feeling a wave of warmth rise to your cheeks as his lips brushed the shell of your ear again. "Yin, no, I mean yes," you stammered, trying to gather your thoughts. "You've hugged me so many times like this, but this one feels different." Jungkook chuckled softly, a deep, velvety sound that made your knees feel weak. He nibbled lightly at your cheek with his teeth, making your breath hitch. "Jungkook, that's because," he whispered against your skin, "I'm now both your best friend and your husband." You smiled shyly, your heart swelling at his words. But before you could say anything, Jungkook gently turned you around in his arms so that you were facing him. His eyes, deep and sincere, stared straight into yours, making it hard to look away. He reached up and cupped your chin softly, his thumb brushing along your jawline. "Jungkook, do you love me now?" he asked, his voice gentle but with an edge of vulnerability. There was no pressure, but his eyes searched yours, waiting for an answer. You froze for a moment, the words caught in your throat. It wasn't that you didn't care about him, you did, but love, you are not sure about that yet. "Jungkook, it's okay," he said softly, his thumb gently stroking your skin. "Jungkook, you don't have to say anything right now. I need you to know that I love you. No, I've loved you for a long time. Even when you were with him, I still loved you." You looked up at him, surprised by the raw emotion in his voice. He rarely let his guard down like this. "Jungkook, I didn't know how to tell you back then," Jungkook continued, his voice thick with emotion. "So I stepped back. I kept my feelings to myself because I didn't want to make things harder for you. But when everything was falling apart, but now when he left you, a part of me was relieved." His confession made your heart ache, and the guilt you felt for not noticing his feelings sooner hit you hard. "Jungkook, I know it's selfish," he said, his eyes glistening slightly as he looked down. "But I'm so happy now, so happy that things happened the way they did. I want to keep you to myself, Yin. I want you to be mine, not because of what he did, but because I love you. I've always loved you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and you couldn't help but feel the weight of his emotions settling over you. You reached up, your hand gently brushing his cheek, and he leaned into your touch, closing his eyes. For a moment, you both stayed in that position for a while. You were still facing each other, your back pressed against the counter. Without breaking eye contact, Jungkook slid his hands under your thighs and lifted you, setting you gently on the counter. His movements were smooth and careful, but there was a tension building between you, making your heart race. Your legs tangled around his waist instinctively as you sat, and the space between your faces decreased to just inches. His warm breath mingled with yours. Her chest rose and fell in rhythm with mine, our breaths syncing naturally. I could see the nervousness in her eyes, but there was something else too, desire. Her trembling fingers reached up and began to trace the line of my jaw, sending a shiver down my spine. I could feel her touch like it was fire on my skin. I lifted my hand and gently cupped her cheek, my thumb brushing over her soft lips. Slowly, I wiped away the glossy pink lipstick that had already started to fade, exposing the natural color of her lips beneath. My eyes never left hers, not for a second. Without thinking, I slid my fingers into her hair, gripping it, softly but firmly, and pulled her closer. Our lips finally touched. She let out a small gawp, her breath hot against my face as our mouths connected. The kiss started slow. My lips explored hers, feeling every soft curve, and she responded by gently pressing her lips against mine, as if she was tasting me. For the first time, our breathing filled the quiet room, becoming the only sound we could hear as the kiss deepened. Her lips parted, inviting me in, and I didn't hesitate. I slid my tongue into her mouth, tasting her, feeling her. The sensation sent a shockwave through both of us. Our tongues touched, and with that single connection, something electric passed between us. Her heartbeat pounded against my chest as she leaned closer, pressing her body into mine. The kiss quickly turned more desperate, more intense. She pressed her lips harder against mine, and her tongue delved deeper into my mouth. I responded eagerly, meeting every movement with my own. We were no longer just kissing, it felt like we were devouring each other. We both needed air, but neither of us wanted to pull away. Our bodies were pressed tightly together, our breaths merging in perfect rhythm. When I exhaled, she inhaled, and when she exhaled, I breathed her in. It was as though we couldn't get enough of each other, as though we were trying to fuse into one. Her hands tangled in my hair as I held her close, my hands still ping her wrist, pulling her deeper into me. The taste of the kiss shifted from sweet to something more intense, more raw. Our lips felt swollen, but we didn't stop. We kissed like we couldn't stop, like stopping wasn't an option. Our breaths became ragged and heavy. My hand traveled up her Bts, holding her close, while the other stayed, tangled in her hair, keeping her argit where I needed her. She moved against me, and it felt like we were fighting to pull each other closer, as if there wasn't enough space between us. Every part of me ached to be closer to her, to feel more of her. But then she suddenly pulled back. You and Jungkook were still catching your breath from the intense kiss when the doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Your heart was still pounding, and you felt nervous as you mumbled, "Yin, I'll see who's there." Jungkook, equally breathless, nodded, a playful smile on his lips. "Jungkook, I'll continue the pancakes then," he teased, trying to regain composure. You quickly rushed to the door, your mind spinning. Taking a deep breath, you tried to calm yourself down, straightening your clothes and fixing your hair before opening the door. The last thing you expected was to see him, standing there. Your eyes widened in shock, and so did Hyunjin's. "Hyunjin, why Yin?" he stammered, looking equally taken aback. Hyunjin had come hoping to talk to Jungkook, thinking that no matter what, Jungkook could convince you to forgive him. But now, standing at your doorstep, he was losing his nerve. "Yin, what are you doing here?" you asked, your voice shaky. Without warning, Hyunjin stepped forward, grabbing your hands. "Hyunjin, baby, listen," he pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. "I'm so sorry for what happened that day. Please, let me explain. I need you. Yin, I can't live without you." You stared at him in disbelief. His touch didn't feel the same anymore. The feelings you once had for him seemed like a distant memory, faded and gone. You didn't feel the spark, the warmth, nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. Before you could pull your hand away or respond, Jungkook appeared from behind, already knowing who was at the door. His voice broke the tension in the air as he said, "Jungkook, who's there?" "Honey." You turned around just in time for him to wrap his bare arms around your waist, pulling you into a back hug. His cheek rested on your shoulder as he looked at Hyunjin, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Jungkook." "Oh, hey Hyunjin," Jungkook said casually, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Long time, no see." Hyunjin's eyes widened at the sight of you and Jungkook so close, so intimate. His heart ached, and anger quickly began to bubble up. "Hyunjin, what the hell is going on?" "Jungkook, let her go." Jungkook raised an eyebrow and chuckled softly, his voice dripping with mockery. "Jungkook, Are you asking me to let go of my wife? The word wife hung in the air, and you could feel Hyunjin's heart breaking just from hearing it. He looked at you, desperate for some kind of denial, for you to tell him it was a joke, that it wasn't real. But you said nothing. You didn't pull away from Jungkook. Instead, you stayed where you were, making it clear that this wasn't a lie. Hyunjin's face fell, betrayal written all over it. Hyunjin, how could you do this to me, Yin? He asked, his voice trembling with hurt. You took a deep breath, pushing Jungkook back slightly, needing space to confront Hyunjin. You were tired of the drama. All you wanted was to live a happy life with Jungkook, without anyone dragging you back into the past. Yin, tell me, you said, your voice steady but filled with the weight of everything you'd held back. After months of disappearing, you show up at my door and ask me this. Who are you, Hyunjin? Who do you think you are? The weight of your words finally hit him, and he stumbled back, defeated. He couldn't change anything now. You were already married, already happy, and he knew deep down he had no one to blame but himself. Suddenly, Hyunjin dropped to his knees, his eyes filled with regret. Hyunjin, I'm sorry, Yin. I'm sorry for everything. I did something unforgivable. I cheated on you. I don't even know how I let myself get that weak. I destroyed everything we had. Somewhere, deep down, I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I don't expect it. I need you to know how much I regret what I did, how much I hate myself for losing you. The weight of his confession hung in the air, but it didn't move you the way it might have in the past. Instead, you felt a sense of clarity. Without hesitation, you slapped him across the face, your hand stinging from the impact. Yin, I respect your honesty, but never show your face again, you said coldly, before slamming the door in his face. You stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Strangely, you didn't feel like crying. Instead, it felt like a weight had been lifted off your shoulders, a burden you didn't realize you'd been carrying until now. Before you could process it further, you suddenly felt a firm grip on your waist, and in an instant, you were pressed against the wall. Jungkook's body was close to yours, his voice low and teasing. Jungkook, you did good, but let's not think about that jerk anymore, okay? You know, I might have killed him for hurting you, but he gave me the most beautiful gift, you, and for that, I can only be grateful. Your eyes softened as you looked up at him, warmth flooding your chest. Without thinking, you threw your arms around him, hugging him tightly. Yin, thank you, Jungkook, you whispered. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there for me. I love you. Jungkook smiled but frowned playfully, then smacked your Bts lightly, causing you to yelp in surprise. Jungkook, nothing would have happened because you've got a permanent subscription to me in your life, he said with a cheeky grin. You chuckled, feeling the tension in your body dissolve. Jungkook picked you up with ease, wrapping your legs around his waist like a koala, and carried you over to the dining table. Jungkook, let's eat he said, placing you down gently, a smile on his face. As you looked at him, you couldn't help but feel grateful for the changes in your life. Hyunjin may have once meant something to you, but Jungkook was the one who truly cared, who loved you in ways no one could ever, and for that, you were thankful.